welcome our guest speaker, Meyers Chambers, to our Christmas Agape Latte. A graduate of Xavier University in New Orleans with undergraduate and graduate degrees in music education, Meyers Chambers worked for several years in Louisiana's Catholic schools as a music teacher. He would later take the opportunity to move his talents north to upstate New York and then to St. Sebastian's School in Needham. Meyers was appointed campus minister for liturgical arts at Boston College in 2003. He is responsible for preparing music, musicians, and vocalists for every Mass celebrated on campus through the Office of Campus Ministry, including some weekend Masses, as well as the annual Welcome Mass, Mass of the Holy Spirit, and Parents' Weekend Mass. Large affairs that typically attract many worshipers. He also co-directs the Liturgy Arts Group. Meyers lives in West Roxbury with his wife, Beth, who is director of Catholic Charities South in Brockton, and they have two sons, one who is a senior at Spring Hill College in Alabama, and the other who is a senior at St. Sebastian's in Needham. Welcome, Meyers Chambers.
Thank you. I wonder, as I wander out under the sky, how Jesus, the Savior, did come for tonight, for poor ornery people like you and like I wonder as I wander out under the sky. Thank you so much for, no. Thank you, I want to thank you so much for, all of you for coming here. This is my first Agape Latte, and it's quite an experience, seeing the bells ring, seeing you eat, seeing you talk. I just don't know where to go with all this. And I want to thank the committee and Karen and everybody involved in it. Thank you so much for asking me to come and be a part of this wonderful experience. Now, I know I don't have a lot of time and I have to cram a lot of things in here. Thank you for doing that introduction because it sort of helped to cut out some of what I have to say. But I'm going to give you this in 3 parts. The first part is going to be the Reader's Digest Evelyn Wood speed reading version of my life. That's part 1. Then I'm going to share a little story with you in part 2. And then in part 3, I'll tell you about my transition to BC. Now, about the Evelyn Wood part. The reason why I'm going to do this fast is for 2 things. First, we don't have a lot of time. Second, I'm going to say things that I probably want you to forget. And I'm okay with that. If you were at, how many of you were at an orientation session that I gave a talk? Anybody? Good. Don't remember that. You will know that whatever comes out of my mouth is going to be made up right there on the spot. It'll be true, it'll be honest, but the kids were asking me earlier, they said, well, what are you going to talk about? I don't know. Do you have it written? No. Are you going to write it? No. And then some of them said to me, well, just share who you are. Share what you are. So let's go back to New Orleans. Anybody else here from New Orleans? Didn't think so. There's a reason. It's warm there still. Growing up in New Orleans, I grew up in a very Catholic family. Everybody in my neighborhood was Catholic. We went to Catholic schools. I went to Corpus Christi School. Early on, I got involved in the church choir when I was about 5. Back then, last Mass was still in Latin. Yeah, that just tells you how old I am. Really, it really was in Latin. And this is all we saw of the priest, okay? This is it, every Sunday, every Mass. But something about church intrigued me, even as a young child. And I wanted to sing with the church choir. And I remember singing O Holy Night in the choir loft on Christmas Eve. And then when I became 7 years old, I became an altar server and got involved in other things. At age 10, I started playing the trumpet, got in the school band. I became a lecturer in 7th grade, graduated from Corpus Christi, went to St. Augustine High School, joined the band, almost didn't make it. It was so tough to join the band back then, you sometimes would get cut. Really, I'm not kidding you. Kids would drop out of the band because it was so hard to go play football. It was that tough. I'm not kidding you. I told you, I don't know what's going to come out of the mouth, but it's going to be the truth. It really did happen. But seriously, it was some of the best times that I ever spent. And you'll notice that I'm talking about growing up in a Catholic environment. That's what I know. That's who I am. That's where I come from. But I wasn't perfect in that Catholic environment. I liked high school so much that I decided to do the 11th grade twice. You can figure that out on your own. But I was shocked that they even invited me to come back and try it again. And then I went through the 12th grade, and it was time for me to graduate, and this very kind teacher named Mr. Bluen, who eventually became the headmaster of the school, said to me, first he said, when are you going to start doing your math homework? Because he was my math teacher. I said, okay, I'll start doing my math. And then he said, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? I don't know. You notice that song that I started singing at the beginning, I wonder as I wander. It's all about life in pilgrimage, us on a journey. Some of us on an interesting journey, some of us on a boring journey, some of us on a secular journey, some of us on a sacred journey, but all of us together on life's journey. My journey took me from St. Augustine High School to Xavier University in New Orleans. Now, the curious thing about Xavier University, it is not a Jesuit school, it is not connected to the Jesuit system. There is a Xavier University in Ohio, at Cincinnati, you know about that. This Xavier University was founded by the only American-born saint. Her name was Catherine Drexel. She was part of the Drexel family, the Drexel Foundation. She was a socialite from Philadelphia who founded a religious order of sisters called the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. And they were founded to work specifically with Native Americans and African Americans in the United States. Because in the 19th century, believe it or not, people who looked like me were not welcome in the church. Let me say that again. In the 19th century, people who looked like me, I'm not talking about debonair and handsome, although I am, we black people were not welcome in the church. Native Americans were not welcome in the church. But there was a group of people who thought seriously everyone needed to hear the word of God. Amen? Would you agree with that? No one should be denied that opportunity or a good education. So Catherine, instead of marrying some wealthy guy, decided to take all of her money and begin a religious order of women. And they founded schools throughout the South and the Southwest. They were on reservations, and they were in places like New Orleans. And Catherine founded Xavier University. It just so happens to be the Feast of St. Francis Xavier today, for whom that school and the one in Ohio is named. Now, Xavier University in New Orleans was founded as a black school. An interesting story about that is that they didn't want to sell the property to Catherine first because she was what, ladies? Hello? Speak up. They wouldn't sell her the property because she was a woman. And number two, they didn't know what she was going to do with it. And when they found out, they really didn't want her to do anything with it. She founded the first and only black Catholic university in this country, of which I'm a proud alumnus twice. As you heard, in 1979, I got my bachelor's in music there, and in 1981, I got a Master of Education with a curriculum and instruction minor, concentration rather. Then I taught, not in Catholic schools in New Orleans, believe it or not. I actually taught in a secular school in a little town called Braithwaite, Louisiana. I taught there for 2 years. I was the first music teacher that they ever had because it was a brand new school. And then I moved to upstate New York, and I worked at the Darrow School in New Lebanon, New York. Anybody from upstate New York in here? But this is a tough crowd. Nobody from Louisiana, and what, 2 people from upstate New York, but you really don't want to let anybody know, right? Columbia County, sound familiar? Southeast of Albany. That's kind of where I was for 4 years. And then the opportunity came for me to move a little further east, here to teach at St. Sebastian's School. I see we have a proud St. Sebastian's alumnus in the house, right, Mike? Absolutely. And I've been there on that staff, first full-time, and now part-time, just doing their church music and working with the Students of Color group and the Glee Club for 27 years now. The next stop for me was to move to the Archdiocese of Boston in 1991 to become an administrator directing the Office for Black Catholics, which I did for 12 years. And I'm going to stop right there because the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey says, is perhaps connected to the last part of the pilgrim journey that we're on. Okay? When Mary birthed Jesus, 'twas in a cow stall, with wise men and farmers and shepherds and all. But high from God's heaven a star's light did fall, and the promise of ages he then did recall. How many of you have ever seen a mustard seed? Yeah, raise your hand if you've seen mustard. How many of you have ever handled a mustard seed? These, my friends, are mustard seeds. I'm going to pass them around. If you want to open the bag and taste one, it's fine with me. I don't care. Enjoy. I don't really need them back. Plant them, if you will. We all know the parable of the mustard seed, what happens, and having faith like a mustard seed, something that's so tiny that grows into a bush so big, right? I'm going to tell you a story. Again, oops, I'm not supposed to do that. I touched the microphone, bad boy. I'm going to tell you a story about a woman. It's a true story. Her name was Helen. I first met Helen, well, the only time I met Helen, was about 15 or 20 years ago. I may have met her, but I never had a conversation with her because Helen was dead. I met Helen in her closed casket. And she made the most profound impact on my spiritual and faith life. That is something that I've never, ever forgotten. Let me explain. Helen outlived all of her friends. She outlived all of her family. She was from the Roxbury, Dorchester area. And like many people in her older years, she decided to move to Cape Cod to live them out. But again, when it was her time to go home, there was nobody to send her home. Now, I enter the story because I'm the music minister at a parish in Roxbury, St. Catherine Drexel. It used to be called St. John St. Hugh. And Helen, for most of her younger years, was a member of that parish. So when the parish priest called and said, we have a funeral on X day, and the woman's name is Helen, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, got all the vital particulars. He said, you can choose the music. There was no request or anything like that. I'm used to doing that. It's kind of routine for a music minister. We get the privilege and the honor of being at baptisms and weddings and daily masses and prayer services and funerals, all this sorts of stuff, right? But I get to the church this time, and there's nobody there. Nobody. Except Helen, the priest, the funeral director, 2 of his assistants, and myself. It's kind of like, what if you gave a party and nobody came? But what struck me about this situation is that I could have mailed it in. I could have pushed the autopilot button, sung that funeral, grabbed the check, gone on about my business. It's done. But I talked to the priest about it just before the funeral mass began. And I said, what's up with this? What do we do here? He said, we're going to have a funeral mass. I said, okay, you say so. So the funeral begins, does the introductory rites, receives the body, places the pall, places the Christian symbols on top. He does the opening prayer, does the first reading. And then I started to sing the song. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. And I sang the verses too. And all of a sudden, I'm used to congregations where there's some wailing, there's some emotion, there's some crying, some shouting sometimes. People are moved. There was nothing. He did the second reading. I did the gospel acclamation. He read the gospel. And then this priest got there, and he preached a homily like I had never heard him preach before. I still remember that homily today, and why that funeral was so important to him. And because it became so important to him, it became especially important to me. I will never, ever forget Helen. I couldn't tell you what that woman looked like. I couldn't tell you what her voice sounded like. I couldn't tell you the smell of her perfume. But I can tell you that Helen changed my life. If Jesus had wanted for any wee thing, a star in the sky or a bird on the wing, or all of God's angels in heaven for to sing, he surely could have it, 'cause he was the king. In the fall of 2002, life in Boston was kind of ugly for the church. We were at the highlight of the priest scandal. Everybody was mad with everybody, especially Bernard Cardinal Law and all of the priests that surrounded him. And it just didn't get good for anybody for a long time. A lot of people became disillusioned. They left the church. They left their religion. They left Boston. We became the poster child for the whole ugly mess. I remember working across the street. It was the Great Divide, you know, that Commonwealth Divide. You guys don't know this because you've only known BC having that property across the street, but there are a few of us in the room who remember that it was the widest street. The Chancery and the Cardinal were over there, Boston College and all the Jesuits were over here, and between the two you would never meet. However, when the Cardinal was being deposed one day, I remember it was in my building. I was in the Cray Library building. And there were cameras, kind of like this one, except tons of them on Commonwealth Avenue. And anybody who made a move, the cameras followed you. So I had to mail a letter, just doing my job, right? Minding my business, doing my job. I opened up the door to the Cray Library because they were waiting for Cardinal Law to come out. It turned out to be me. Obviously, I'm not the Cardinal. But that camera followed me all the way over to the main building. Then when I came back, it followed me all the way back into the Cray Library. I'm like, what? I'm going to be on CNN for walking across the campus? Okay, you can do that. But my mail came, and in my mail was a letter from a colleague of mine who works out at Holy Cross College. Ooh, I said the word. You know, that little school in Worcester. And they were looking for something. Now, the reason why he sent this letter to me is because as a church musician, I kind of coordinated communication between all of the church musicians. I still do that today. And they were looking at the time for someone to do the job I do at BC out at Holy Cross. And he said in his letter, Meyer, would you please circulate this to all the musicians? And by the way, if you're interested in this job, you should apply for it too. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm like, I work for the Archdiocese of Boston, man. Retirement, I'm good. I don't need a job. Then he called me up, and he told me the same thing. You know, would you circulate this again to the musicians in the diocese? And if you're interested in the job, apply for it yourself. I'm like, no, thank you. I'm good. You know, I thought I worked there 12 years, planned to retire from there. It's going to be a beautiful life. Then, you know how fly paper is? You kind of put it down, it's still on your hand. You put it down, it's still on your hand. Well, about a month or so later, he sent the letter again, asking me to do the same thing. It seems like every time I throw that piece of paper in the trash can, it'd end up right back on my desk. So I said, oh, God must be talking to me about something, so I better pay attention. So I I updated my resume and sent the application in. And while I was doing it, an alumnus of Boston College, who sings in one of my choirs, who is a very good friend of mine, said to me, you know, he called me up, he said, you know, I know you're doing this thing with Holy Cross, but BC is looking for the same thing. I said, oh, okay. Well, if BC's looking for it, since I've already done the resume, I'll send it in. So I went through the interview process at Holy Cross, and they were very, very, very interested in me. And I was very, very grateful. I thought, wow, I'll be working at a university. I'll be Professor Chambers. Yeah, baby. Hey, it looked good at the time. Then I thought about that 50-minute trek every day back to West Roxbury, to Worcester. I was still interested. However, there were two of us that Holy Cross was interested in. And as luck would have it, they chose the other guy. No, don't feel bad for me. I did okay. The other person, and when we were going through the interview process, I didn't know who it was. My colleague who works at Holy Cross knew who it was, and he said, Meyer, this is going to be tough because I know both of you guys, and you're both great. We'd love to work with both of you, but we can only choose one. And it just so happens that the gentleman that they chose grew up right here at the St. Ignatius Church, and was sort of on the music staff at St. Ignatius Church. His name is Paul Melly. He's a fantastic musician, and I'm so glad Holy Cross got him. Yeah, there was an underlying little thing there. Because it's funny how fate and God work sometimes. It seems no sooner did I hang up the phone, here's Boston College calling me. Now, Boston College did not know that I had applied to Holy Cross and vice versa. But there's Father James Earps on the other line saying, we've been reading your resume and we really do need this position filled. Are you interested in coming to talk to us? Sure, why not? BC, 10 minutes up the road. I don't have to drive an hour to get to work every day. 10 minutes, oh yeah, baby, I'll talk to you. So I came in and we had a wonderful, wonderful talk. And then I got to meet the staff. There was a roundtable discussion with some of the campus ministers. Then I got to meet Father Appleyard. And then I got put to the acid test. The original director of the Liturgy Arts Group, a woman by the name of Letitia Blaine, met me up at St. Joe's Chapel. And she kind of heard about me over the years, knew I was around, knew kind of things I did. She said, but I really don't know you as a musician. You know, what have we got here? So she said, sit down and play for me, play this. I said, I'll play that. And she said, sing this. And I sang that. And then it seemed like it was all said and done, except there was one more thing. I had to sit with 4 students. And boy, did they put me through it. Because the director that preceded me was someone that was beloved. She's a great lady. She's still in the area now. And they wanted to make sure that whoever came behind her was the right person. History is going to judge that for me. But I will tell you, it was almost 11 years ago that that happened. And in that time, some incredible, incredible faith experiences have happened. We buried a pope. We had a tragedy. We went to Fenway Park. I traveled to Ireland with the choir. All sorts of wonderful things. But it all started back in New Orleans at Corpus Christi Church. And it wasn't so much my faith that was the size of that mustard seed. We all have parents. We come from someplace. I credit them for planting their mustard seed in me. I also thank them for that. I wonder, as I wander out under the sky, how Jesus the Savior did come for to die for poor ornery people like you and like I wonder as I wander out under the sky. Thank you.